Good afternoon. Hi, everyone. My name is Terry Goldberg. I'm the Executive Director of the Northeast Waste Management Officials Association, or NWMOA. And I want to welcome you to today's webinar on growing the food waste upcycling economy. I'm really excited that we have such a great turnout today, and we have such a great panel of presenters to share information on this emerging industry. Before we get into the presentations, I just want to do a few minutes of sort of orientation to the GoToWebinar platform. I also want to mention that this webinar is being co-sponsored by both the Northeast Waste Management Officials Association and the Northeast Recycling Council, or NERC. Unfortunately, Lynn Stein from NERC is not able to join us today, but this was certainly a joint effort along with a number of other folks from that are presenting today, and their organizations were instrumental in planning today's webinar. So that you're familiar with the GoToWebinar platform, first I want to mention that we are recording this webinar. We will be posting both the webinar and the slides both on NWMOA's website and NERC's website, and we will let participants and registrants know where to get the slides and the recording as soon as we can get all of that posted. Second, we urge folks to post questions throughout the presentation. We'll first have the 3 presentations, and then we'll follow up with questions and answers, and hopefully we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. In my experience, the audience for these kind of webinars have lots of wonderful questions, and we want to certainly hear from you and your questions and comments as we go. In order to post questions, you can see, first of all, if you want to enlarge or shrink your control panel, use the little orange arrow on the top left-hand side of the GoToWebinar control panel that will expand or contract the full GoToWebinar panel. If you sort of look toward the middle of the gray area, there's a row that says questions. If you click on the square box there with the dash through it, that'll enlarge the question box, and you can post your questions in that area. If you need to communicate, particularly with me, about anything logistic with the webinar, or you just want to comment on the presentations in some way, you can do that through the chat feature, which is at the bottom of that gray area of the control panel. It operates the same way, using the little square box to enlarge the chat feature. So I will begin by introducing our presenters. We're still waiting for one of them to join us. Hopefully that will happen momentarily. But our first presenter is Turner Wyatt. Turner is the co-founder and CEO of the Upcycled Food Association. He is a social entrepreneur focused on reducing food waste and improving our environment and economy. Turner came to the upcycled food movement by way of the Food Rescue Hunger Relief Movement, where he served as the executive director of an award-winning organization for 7 years. He's excited to continue growing this powerful solution. Our second presenter, who hopefully will join us soon, is Anna Hammond. Anna is the founder and CEO of Matriarch Foods. Prior to Matriarch, Anna spent 25 years as a nonprofit leader, successfully scaling programs and teams into dynamic, stable, and endowed organizations. Most recently, she was the executive director for the Sylvia Center, a trailblazing food education program that, under her leadership, collaborated with farmers, institutions, funders, and foundations committed to solving food insecurity through education and reimagined food systems. Together, they expanded healthy eating and cooking programs in public housing, community centers in all 5 New York City boroughs and all 6 school districts in Columbia County. It'd be great to have Anna join us. Finally, we're really privileged to have John Deutsch with us. Dr. Jonathan Deutsch is a professor in the Department of Food and Hospitality Management in the College of Nursing and Health Professions at Drexel University and director of the Drexel Food Lab. Previously, Dr. Deutsch was the inaugural James Beard Foundation Impact Fellow, leading a national curriculum effort on food waste reduction for chefs and culinary educators, and was named a food waste warrior by Food Tank. Before moving to Drexel, Dr. Deutsch built the culinary arts program at Kingsborough Community College, City University of New York, and the PhD concentration in food studies at the CUNY Graduate Center and School of Public Health. At Drexel, he directs the Drexel Food Lab, a culinary innovation and food product research and development lab focusing on solving real-world food system problems in the areas of sustainability, health promotion, and inclusive dining. He's the author or editor of 8 books, including Barbecue, A Global History, Culinary Improvisation in Gastropolis, Food and Culture in New York City, and numerous articles in journals of food studies, public health, and hospitality education. So it's a real privilege to have this panel with us today. And I'm going to turn it over to Turner. Thank you, Turner.
Thank you. Thanks, Terry, and thanks, Numa, for having us. Wow, John, I have known you for years now, and I had no idea about half that stuff. I have a feeling that's like a 10th of John Deutsch's resume. And same with Anna Hammond, who I'm 2 of my favorite people to talk to about this topic. So I'm really excited for this conversation. My name's Turner Wyatt. I'm the CEO of the Upcycled Food Association. And I'm really excited to be here because we get to talk about one of my favorite things to talk about, upcycled food. So let's see here. I'm going to share my screen and get us started. Yeah, there it is. So again, welcome everyone. Thanks to Anna and John and Matriarch and Drexel and Numoa for having us here today and getting a nice big audience. It's exciting to see so many people come out and be excited to learn about this topic, really important topic, food waste, and how an impressive group of businesses is building the first consumer product driven solution to this incredibly important problem. So I'm going to spend the first couple minutes in just talking about food waste, talking about upcycled food, where have we been, where are we at, where are we going, sort of thing. And then I'm going to pass it off to Anna, who's going to talk about who are the business leaders that are making a big impact here. Oops, I'm getting an echo now. I don't know if someone else's computer. I don't know if the audience can hear that echo. I hope not. There it goes. Thanks for being patient with technical difficulties there. So we're going to hear from Anna on who are the big business leaders that are making an impact in the upcycled movement, it's booming movement to prevent food waste. And then we're going to hear from John, what are the big questions that we're asking about the upcycled movement and what are we learning about it? So that's me. Let's get started. So how did this all get started here? Well, it started by a desire to prevent food waste. As some of you know, about 30% of food is wasted. It's about a billion tons and $1 trillion. That's the number that I really like to focus on because it's baffling, $1 trillion. Think about if there was a oil pipeline, crude oil pipeline somewhere in the world where $1 trillion worth of crude oil leaked out every year. That would be ridiculous, right? The oil and gas industry would figure out some way immediately to close that leak in the pipeline because $1 trillion is a ton of money and they're not going to let that fly, right? But for some reason in the food industry, that isn't the case. And there's $1 trillion leak sort of in the food supply chain where all this perfectly good food is going to waste. And that's important because it's a huge contributor to climate change. According to Project Drawdown, preventing food waste is actually the #1 most effective solution to prevent global warming of more than 2 degrees Celsius. And it's a huge problem economically speaking, $1 trillion. It's a huge problem socially. And so we need to figure this out, and we need to figure it out right now. The Sustainable Development Goal from the UN to prevent food waste is to have food waste by 2030, which means we have about 8.5 years now to figure out what to do with 500 million tons of food every year. And so we need not only solutions, we need solutions that scale really, really quickly. And what do we know about consumer profit-driven solutions? It's that they scale really quickly. And so the upcycled movement is really exciting because it's an opportunity not only to prevent food waste, but to do it right now, which is exactly what we need. And so here we are at the beginning stages of building this really powerful new movement that gives us an opportunity to solve the most important solution to climate change and unlock $1 trillion all at once. And so about 18 months ago or so, October 2019, a group of upcycled businesses came together and they decided we're going to start building this industry to systematically grow the upcycled solution. Upcycling prevents food waste by creating new products out of otherwise wasted food. And what we want to implement is a systematic solution to this problem, to grow the number of products that include upcycled ingredients systematically, not by just giving a grant to this business or that business, but to kind of elevate the tide, elevate the consumer understanding of the solution more broadly. And so they got together and we said, well, first thing we have to define upcycled food. A lot of people are using this word upcycled in various ways. We need to unify. So we worked with Harvard Law School, Natural Resource Defense Council, World Wildlife Fund, and some other groups, ReFed, to create the first ever definition of upcycled food, which basically says that upcycled food prevents food waste. There were some other things, some technicalities in there, and you can read on our website about that process of defining upcycled food. But basically, upcycled food it's a way of preventing food waste, creating a new product out of food that otherwise would have gone to waste. But then we said, well, which are the products that meet this new definition? So we had to create a standard by which you could measure one product or another against to determine whether it met the definition. So over the last year and a half, we've been developing this certification that is not only a way of providing a great degree of rigor and excellence within the industry to make sure that we're remaining focused on our values of preventing food waste with the growth of the upcycled industry, but it's also a huge consumer education tool because you're going to start seeing this on packages all over the world. And retailers want to support this because we know from some great research that John might talk about that 97% of consumers think positively about grocery stores that carry upcycled products. And so this certification label, the mark that you see on the screen there, actually it's not quite on the screen, you'll see it in a bit. When you start seeing that label, it shows consumers, look, this is an upcycled product. When you buy this product, it helps to prevent food waste. When you buy this product, you're participating in the best solution to climate change. And so it's a huge opportunity to spread the word about upcycled food to millions of people all over the world. And no one business can do that on their own. We have to work together. But if we align the voice of hundreds of businesses all saying the same thing and all using the same messaging and showing consumers this logo, this mark, kind of the banner of this movement, then educating millions of consumers becomes possible. And why is that important? Well, 80% of people want to buy more upcycled foods, but less than 10% of them actually know what they are. So that's a problem. And it shows that if we can educate a lot more people, then demand will increase. And why is that? It's because everyone wants to prevent food waste. We all learn that preventing food waste is necessary for a variety of reasons. One of our members, Matson, did a study recently where they found 99% of people care about food waste. 95% of people want to do something about it in their own lives. It's completely transcends politics and geography. And so we have the best solution to climate change. And it's also something that 95, 99% of people agree on. So there's obviously all these environmental reasons why it's important to prevent food waste, but there's economic reasons. It's really a solution that appeals to everyone. And so we can have a huge impact on the environment if we grow, if we prevent food waste. Upcycling helps us to prevent food waste in a consumer-driven way by educating consumers the impact that their purchases have every time they enter a grocery store on the problem of food waste and therefore climate change. And what we end up with is a powerful solution to prevent food waste at scale. So our organization was co-founded by these groups of businesses, and we're working really hard now to do the following things: grow the network, educate consumers, increase investment in the space. Just heard a really interesting, read the headline of an article this morning that one of our members, Comet Bio, just finished their Series C investment round. I think $20 million they just raised. So bringing more capital into the space to help it accelerate and then improve the supply chain. So we'll get into it, but it's important for everyone to know that this is a huge trend. All the right players are bought in, consumers are bought in, grocery stores are bought in. Consumers want products that are good for the environment, and we're giving them the opportunity. This movement, this whole industry is giving consumers the ability to participate in that movement via the products they buy, to vote with your dollars. And so I'm really excited to welcome Anna Hammond, who I think is on now. Is that right?
Anna has joined us and she's unmuted. Go ahead, Anna.
All right, welcome, Anna. Thank you so much for joining.
Hello, glad to be here.
Glad to see you. Can we see you? I don't know if we can see Anna's video, but we can hear your voice, Anna. Nice to hear your voice. So
you need to bring back the slides. There we go.
There we go. Thanks for being here, Anna. So I want to pass it off to you and just to have a conversation about who are the business leaders in this space that are making an impact and driving this solution right now. But first, can you just give a profile of, we heard your personal bio in the introduction. Can you give us a profile of Matriarch Foods and talk about what's the upcycled supply chain? So what's the thing that otherwise would have gone to waste, and how are you upcycling it? What's the new product? And start with that profile, because I think it's fascinating and people are going to think that's interesting.
Well, thanks for having me today. Sorry for the technical difficulty. If you can just hear me, that's fine. But yeah, so Matriarch Foods upcycles farm surplus and fresh cut remnants into healthy, affordable products for food service. And before launching Matriarch, I built a healthy eating program for youth and families living in public housing in New York City, which is the largest public housing in the United States. It's about the size of the city of Atlanta. So dearth of access to healthy food, and then we were working with a lot of farmers with excess produce and nowhere to put it. So that was kind of the initial idea for the business. But really looking across the supply chain at what was going to waste in field, but also in processing facilities, and seeing that as a food source for food insecure people, in addition to everyone, in a world where, you know, some say almost 50% of food goes to waste. There are some different stats on on-farm food loss, anywhere from 20% to 90%. So really, if we solved this issue through business and some nonprofit work, we would be able to feed the world with what we already have. So, you know, just want to kind of lay that out as a premise, at least for Matriarch, and sort of what our value proposition is and why we do what we do. So currently, our first product is an upcycled vegetable broth concentrate, and that is made from fresh cut remnants, carrots, celery, and onions that are the byproducts of fresh cut facilities that do, all the carrot sticks and celery sticks you see in the grocery store. Imagine all the carrot and celery that's not there. In addition to onions, slicing facilities that are doing perfect circular onion slices for restaurant chains, and until working with Matriarch, we're throwing out 2/3 of the onion. So our supply chain is pretty interesting, and it's not unlike some of the supply chains of other businesses in the Upcycled Food Association. But you wanted to talk to me, or wanted me to talk a little bit about supply chain. And one of the things I think that we're all doing, all of these businesses, and I would say all the businesses in the UFA are leading in different ways. But the primary way, and the way in which we all are similar, is that we are creating supply chains, viable and food safe supply chains, from food that otherwise would go to waste. So this is nutritious food that's available, but that may be getting put onto the factory floor instead of being collected. And so what we're all trying to do is create good business models for industry, from small to large, to utilize all of the product that already has been grown, harvested, transported, in some cases lightly processed. So does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, fascinating. Really giving the businesses that you're working with a huge opportunity to commercialize, to make money off something that was previously going to waste, and then giving consumers an opportunity via your customers to have a delicious product that helps to prevent food waste. It's awesome.
Yeah, and I think, the other thing I just would add is that, not all upcycled businesses are, focused on massive food systems change, but by their nature, they are focused on food systems change. So even if, a company is making snacks, they're contributing to the diversion of waste from landfill. And so there are lots of different ways and different amounts that businesses are working in this arena, but everyone is contributing to, the change of the food system for the better of the environment, if not also for the health, greater health of all people.
Exactly. Yeah. So Anna, talk to us a little bit more about who are the business leaders that are making an impact in this space right now.
I don't want to cherry pick from the from the UFA. I realize we probably should have put a list of businesses that are doing this work, that are like I say, sort of all contributing to some greater or lesser extent. And when I say lesser, it's only because for example, they may be at the very beginning. Reveal, for example, a business that came out of the Drexel Food Lab, just started about 1.5 years ago, and they're making a drink from avocado pits. And I think that they've captured a very unusual piece of the food waste system, and they're extracting something from a byproduct. And eventually that if their business can scale, then they will be contributing at a much larger level. Alternatively, and not to blow our own horn of Matriarch, but we are commercially producing and working with large fresh cut facilities that have anywhere from 100 to 300,000 pounds of vegetable remnants a week that otherwise would be going to landfill, and we are now turning those into healthy products for food service, food banks, hospitals, corporate cafeterias, etc. We're currently in the Kroger Zero Waste, Zero Hunger program, and there are a number of companies in that group. 2x2 is doing a barley milk. Grain for Grain has a repurposed grain. Netzrow is building a lot of new technology for the upcycling of byproducts. So I guess I would point the audience to the UFA website to really look at all of the companies that are doing work in this space, and whether large or small, you know, doing very interesting work, I think.
Yeah, that's great. And if you go to our website, upcycledfood.org, under membership tab, there is a member directory, and you can see the 170 businesses that are in our membership right now that, as Anna said, are at all different stages of development. Some of them are brand new, some of them are big multinational food corporations that everyone has heard of. And I think what that shows is that everyone has something to gain from this. You know, food businesses can utilize upcycled ingredients in a formulation that they already have, even, right? I mean, they don't have to be a tried and true, you know, upcycled company. We are an upcycled company. They can just be a food company, or for that matter, dietary supplement, cosmetics, pet food, all of the other types of products that we're certifying right now, and just say, hey, we want to connect with our consumers in a new way and provide a more sustainable product. And so we're gonna, when we're doing a new product or we're doing a reformulation, we're gonna include an upcycled product instead. And so thanks so much, Anna. We're gonna come back to you in just a moment. But for right now, I wanna pass it off to Dr. Chef, Professor John Deutsch, to talk about the research and challenges that this industry is facing. And really this comes down to the questions. A lot of the audience members have probably asked already, okay, there's a lot of hype about the upcycled industry. People are making big investments, you know, retailers and everyone, you know, people are getting excited about this, but are consumers really gonna buy it? So talk to us about, what are we learning about some of these big questions about the upcycled industry?
Yeah. Happy to address that. And you could we'll go through the slides. I think I have some data to show.
Perfect, John. And just let me know when you want me to go to the next one, starting right now.
You can go ahead. Yeah, so let me tell you a little bit about our lab and about what we do, and then I'll talk about some of these answers. So Drexel Food Lab is a good food product design and culinary innovation lab, and we work across sustainability, health promotion, and access. And one of the great things about upcycling is it really dings all of those bells, right? It's sustainable in that it's diverting what would otherwise be wasted into value-added food products. Many of those products are healthier. You know, Anna's product is a great example of that, and I'm so glad Anna does this work, because one of the criticisms I hear a lot is, well, upcycled is great, but you know, is an upcycled cookie really better? It's still a cookie. And you know, I would say, first of all, yes, it's incrementally better, but second of all, there's a lot of healthy and delicious food products that are much better than conventional alternatives in the upcycled space. And then access, so creating things affordably for as many people as possible, and that includes both socioeconomic access, but also allergens and distribution and food service. And so again, Anna's product and others that we work on with and on sort of ding all those bells. Go to the next one. Okay. So we do food product design and culinary innovation, but I always remind people that our true product is our future colleagues. So the food product is one of our outcomes, but I think more important for us than the food product is our next generation of colleagues who are trained in this kind of work. We have one really wonderful full-time employee named Chef Rachel Sherman, who's a research chef with a pastry background, and everyone else who works in our lab is a student or a faculty member. So we're really all about giving students these hands-on experiences in research and the upcycled food world, to then become upcyclers themselves at some point. You can go to the next one. So our principles are very simple: do good, feed well, keep going. Do good means everything we do has some social value. Feed well is we're first and foremost taste more than functional ingredients or additives or things like that. And then keep going. We're looking for market-driven, sustainable solutions. You can go to the next one. So Turner mentioned defining upcycled food, which is one of the first things we did as an Upcycled Food Association. Even before we defined it, we did some formative research in what do you even call this thing? And so this was our very first sort of test marketed, explicitly upcycled product. And if you look in the kind of fine print, it's called rescued relish. It was before the term upcycled even was in widespread use. And it was a collaboration between Phil Abundance, which is our food bank in Philadelphia, and Bryan Street, which is our hipster pickle manufacturer in Phil Abundance. And it's based on a Pennsylvania Dutch chow chow. And that chow chow concept is really important for upcycling, because one of the challenges in the upcycled supply chain, especially for fresh produce, is you see inconsistencies and seasonal variations. So what's great about this relish is it's a mixed vegetable relish, but it still has its characteristic flavor if it's extra cauliflower this week and extra turnip next week. And so this was sort of a rapid labeling kind of thought piece to see if we could even make a viable upcycled product with these partners in this supply chain. And then you can go to the next one. And then this is sort of fast forward to our students are now starting and launching their own upcycled food products. And this is a member of the Upcycled Food Association called Hidden Gems is the company, DBA Reveal Avocado Seed Brew. This is Zuri Masood and Sheetal Bahirat, two of our grad students in food science and culinary arts and science, who basically, in the process of doing their culinary work, saw the opportunity for upcycling. And one of the things I teach and really instill and try to instill in the students is this idea of mindful cooking, that just like we can eat as mindful consumers and be thoughtful about what goes into our bodies, we can also cook the same way. And instead of throwing something away, we can say, what is the potentiality of this food? What can be done with it? And that was what gave birth to this avocado seed brew. What's extra exciting, there's a few things that are extra exciting about this product. One is that it solved another problem, which is avocado seeds are very challenging for composting unless you have really, high level industrial equipment. But for home composting, if anyone's home composted, maybe even years later, you'll see avocado seeds. But in the process of steeping them for this antioxidant-rich beverage, they're also broken down to become more compostable. So that's really exciting. The other thing that's really exciting, I've been in food product development for decades, and in the fine print of every brief we get, it says all ingredients must be FDA GRAS, which stands for generally recognized as safe. And it's just kind of a given. You're not going to introduce a product to a market that uses ingredients that are not FDA approved. And it turns out avocado seeds had, when they started this project, were not FDA GRAS. And I thought, okay, lovely idea, but you don't have an FDA approved product. You can't move forward. Time to pivot and come up with a new senior project or thesis. And their response was, what are you doing April 23rd? Because we have a self-affirmation hearing in DC to get avocado seeds approved. And they did the legwork and got some pro bono toxicology support, and were able to do that. So that's what students can sort of bring to the table in the upcycled food world. You go to the next slide, Turner. Great. So as I mentioned, I'll just really briefly go into some of the data that we've gathered around upcycled and the potentiality of upcycled food. One of the very first studies we did was to figure out, what do you even call this stuff? And I mentioned we started with rescued relish. And so, being good academics, we came up with a really deliberately boring, dry term called VASP to describe upcycled foods, value-added surplus products. So we described what you could do with value-added surplus products and said, you know, here's this category of food. It's byproducts from other manufacturers. So for example, you take a bunch of carrot trimmings from baby carrots and you make a carrot broth. That's a value-added surplus product. What would you call that? And you know, rescued, salvaged, repurposed, upcycled, and upcycled was far and away the clear winner. And I don't want to take credit because it was certainly a term that was in use, but that research was really important in sort of establishing that if you call this upcycled, consumers respond well and tend to prefer that term over others. We can go to the next one. The other thing we found in that research was that consumers consider upcycled foods to be different, and that's really important from a marketing perspective. So they don't consider upcycled foods to be in the natural and organic category, and they don't consider upcycled foods to be in the conventional everyday grocery category. They see it as something else, and that something else they see as closer to the natural organic world than the conventional world. And that will be important in just a minute when we talk about willingness to pay. And we can go to the next slide. I'll skip this one. Turner talked about our work on helping to define the term upcycled foods. And so we did a study of the founding members of the Upcycled Food Association to come to some common definition, and that's all I'll say about that one for now. All of this work, by the way, is published, so I can share articles and links if people contact me. One of the big questions that we're addressing currently is, do people even know about upcycled food? And will they pay for it, and will they accept it? So, you know, as you heard from Turner and Anna's presentations, this makes a lot of sense for a lot of reasons. But, you know, when the rubber hits the road, is there a market there, and is there acceptance? So one of the first things we found is that really there's very low awareness and familiarity with upcycled food products. And you can look at that statistic in two different ways. One way to look at it is, this is really frustrating. You know, the Upcycled Food Association is 2 years old. Upcycled is happening in fashion and in other industries, and we should be aware of this, and you know, consumers should be aware, and we're not doing a great job. That's one interpretation. Another interpretation is, this is a really fascinating, exciting time because not that many people know about upcycling. There's a lot of room for growth and a lot of white space from a marketing perspective. And you know, I kind of prefer the second, but I leave that to you. We can go to the next one. So even after showing them a little bit about upcycled foods and what upcycled food is, we can go to the next one. People still don't know very much. They have a little bit more recognition of what upcycled food is, having heard an explanation, but not enough to really move the needle. We can go to the next one. We can skip this one. All right. And then I think this is the final study I wanted to talk about, which is willingness to pay. Oh no, there's one more after this. So one of the big questions marketers have is, will people accept upcycled food, and will they pay as much as conventional food or even more? And what we find is really interesting. So if with nothing else, first of all, it varies by category. So you see we tested chicken nuggets and granola bars, ice cream, muffins, pasta sauce to ask about willingness to pay. And if you do nothing else, if you just say in Anna's case, here's a soup and here's an upcycled soup, consumers will not inherently pay more for that upcycled soup. Then can you go to the next slide, Turner? But with a little bit of messaging, and we're not talking about an hour webinar, we're talking about a little bit of a sentence, you know, this is what upcycled food is and why it's good for the environment. Consumers will pay more, and in some cases quite a bit more. So the kind of grayscale line is the baseline. The orange is an emotional messaging. Won't somebody think of the children? We have too much food and we have too much hunger and we're not connecting the dots, and isn't that terrible? And the green line, where we see the biggest effect in willingness to pay, is a rational messaging. And rational messaging is just simply, this is a product that's good for the environment and can reduce food waste, and you know, these are the benefits of that product. So we really like and are excited by the progress here, and that's led to manufacturers doing and the Upcycled Food Association doing a much more targeted job of communicating the benefits of upcycling and messaging that to consumers. You can go to the next one. We'll skip that. So
I guess that was the last one that you had on there. But John, if you want to touch on that last one you were thinking about, go for it.
Yeah, I'll just conclude with saying that this has been also very influential around the creation of a logo. So, and I'm sure Turner will talk about this next. But the Upcycled Food Association now has a certified upcycled logo that companies can apply to have on their packages. And that willingness to pay information around the messaging was very influential in helping us think through whether the need for such a logo exists, what it should mean, and what kind of visual cues and symbols would go into that. And one of the most interesting findings from that is every upcycled food logo I'd seen before we did this study was some sort of arrow, and this audience knows that very well, some sort of like upward facing arrow or sort of quasi recycling, but also pointing up arrow. And it just kind of makes intuitive sense. But what we heard from consumers was they associate that arrow with recycling, they associate recycling with trash, and they associate upcycled food with trash if that arrow is on a package. And so what tested really well is actually in the bottom right of this slide, and it is that tiny little green leaf. And they think of the leaf as sprouting and fresh and new and growing upwards, and associate that much more positively. So that was something that we just kind of assumed was the case, that, you know, it's upcycling, it's a cycle, it's an arrow, and it really tested horribly. So this was a great lesson for me as well, because I feel like I've been in a million projects where, you know, you get a sheet, a sort of proof sheet from the designer that has, here's a list of 9 possible logos, and, you know, everyone replies all to the email and says, I like logo number 4 the best, and I like number 1 second best, and everyone says, okay, well, you know, 4 had the most votes among our little internal group, let's go with number 4. But it's not really a data-informed approach, and so this allowed us to test, you know, the shape that you're seeing in the bottom right, that green leaf, the colors, the prominence of the word up, all of that was very strategic and consumer informed and not coincidental. So I will stop there, and thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, John. Yeah, it was a totally fascinating process coming up with that logo, multiple studies and rounds of studies, talking to hundreds, if not thousands of consumers on what they think, and we're really happy with the result. That's that's one of our new logos as an organization, what you see in the bottom right. That's not the Upcycled certified logo, which is not on this slide. And I encourage you to go to upcycledfood.org, and there's a whole certification tab, and you can see those certification marks. Those are the marks that you're going to start seeing in the grocery store. Those are the marks that we're really setting up as the flagship of our organization and of our movement. That's what we're telling retailers. Hey, when consumers see this, they think more positively about your grocery store. So we're telling consumers, hey, when you see this, you're participating in the best solution to climate change. And what we think is that in the years to come, consumers are going to be building their whole shopping carts based on products that have this logo. Because again, preventing food waste is just this ubiquitous solution that everyone agrees on. And we're not fighting against people's main purchase decision drivers: taste, cost, convenience, nutrition. We're just saying, hey, if all of those things were equal, or like John said, in the case of someone like Anna, even better nutrition, for example, then wouldn't you want to buy the one that also helps to prevent food waste? And what we're finding, another study that we did on the logo itself, was that 51% of people had increased intent to buy for a product that had the logo versus the same product without, which is a astounding finding, really encouraging finding to me, because no one had ever seen this logo before. You know, people, just based on the design and based on what, you know, kind of how it resonates with them, they're more than half of them have increased intent to buy for that product. And so we've really, which by the way, ranked higher than other certification logos that had been invested in and on the market for years. So we have something special here. This movement, this upcycled food and product movement, is unique in that it resonates with consumers in a new way that's different from organic or non-GMO or the other labels that drive people's purchase decisions. And so it's a really exciting time, because we're in the very beginning stages of this kind of revolution in our consumer product and retail environment to include more of these food waste fighting ingredients throughout the store. That's my take on it, but I want to get Anna and John's take on that question. What really are the differences between upcycling and other food waste solutions? There's a lot of solutions to food waste out there. What's different about this one? So Anna, what would your answer to that be?
I mean, I think what's different about this one is that this starts in the supply chain as opposed to in the home. You know, there's sort of some very clear differentiations there. It's creating an awareness that you can buy products that mitigate food waste, in addition to, you know, being more careful about your own waste in your home. So I think that's, you know, I think that's one of the differentiations in terms of other ways to mitigate waste. I think that maybe, you know, what I think is sort of the more interesting piece of it is what the upcycled food movement is telling consumers, is that we're in the midst of a revolution around our food system, period, which was developed to create efficiencies, you know, 100 years ago that didn't exist, like refrigeration, for example, shelf-stable products, and those, you know, and those efficiencies created inefficiencies that we're now addressing. So there, I guess there's a, you know, there's a sub message about the overall way that we produce food that's important in the upcycled movement. It's really a revolution around food production and procurement, and the consumer thinking more actively about how what they eat affects everything else.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And I read recently that contrary to what you might think, people are actually more concerned about that now after COVID than they were before. So I want to keep having this conversation. I think we can turn our cameras back on. Is that right? And now you can probably see the wrong screen. Yeah, so let's turn our cameras back on. And
you want to go to some of the questions, Turner?
Yeah, absolutely. And I encourage people to type in questions in the GoToMeeting control panel, or sorry, GoToWebinar control panel on the right. And I'm going to pass that question over to John here, but please do submit some of your questions right now. So John, we heard from Anna, one difference is that it enables consumers to fight waste outside of their own home. Right now, people can already fight waste inside their own home, and actually that's one of the most important things, because people believe that all the food waste happens at restaurants and grocery stores, when in reality the worst offender by sector is households. So that's important, but it's not the whole picture. And if you care about food waste, you want to not only prevent food waste inside your home, but outside. That's one difference between the upcycled industry. What else?
Yeah, first of all, it's delicious. I think it's hard to get excited about, organics waste reduction, without something tangible. And I think what Anna said about the consumer-facing nature of this, I think is important twofold. One is, even if you're very committed to, stopping, reversing climate change and living greener, it's really hard to sort of feel the impact of that. If I switch to a renewable energy provider, I'm still going to plug my computer into my outlet and it's still going to power on. And I have some sort of good feeling that behind the scenes, the sun is shining on the solar panel rather than the coal burning in the generator. But ultimately, I don't really know, and I just kind of take a leap of faith and try to do my best, right? What I think upcycled food does is it really provides a tangible, similarly, I could shop in a supermarket and they say, oh, we have a biodigester and we're fueling the building or our warehouse through biodigestion. Wonderful, but I don't see that. I don't know really if that's true. I can't get my head around it. But upcycled foods, I can get my head around. I can literally, consume and taste and touch. And so it feels meaningful to me as a consumer. And the other thing is, yes, while I can have better practices at home in terms of home composting or buying less, I might, as a consumer, need some guidance. And I feel like upcycled food products are a great sort of model, for someone who doesn't make broth at home. It's great to buy Matriarch, and now I have access. And as I'm tasting Matriarch's product, I might start to say, oh, I used to remember saving vegetable scraps and making stock. Maybe I should start doing that again, in addition to, buying the prepared product, right? Or, maybe I should try making bread from spent grain, so it makes people think differently about their own green practices as well. And I think that's really encouraging, because we need the public to fight these battles, right? This can't be a talking heads type solution. We need to work together, and there needs to be political power, and there needs to be energy. It's really movement. And food is one of those things that really cuts to your core, your memories and your smell, and it's so evocative and emotional. And so getting people, in the gut to think about these kinds of issues, I think, is really important.
Oh,
first, I want to ask if you can turn on your webcam so we can see you. If you're if you don't know where it is, it's on the control panel. It's on the left-hand side. It's a little icon of a camera, and that's where you can click on. So we do have a bunch of questions. So I'm going to sort of start with you, Turner. Just some folks had some basic questions about some of the figures you provided. So you sort of started out talking about the scope of the sort of food waste issue. So one question is, were those figures for global impacts or just North America or the US? You also, quoted $1 trillion. Is that per year? What's the time frame for that kind of those figures that you presented in the beginning?
Yeah, thanks. All of those figures are global and annual. So
Okay,
1 billion tons of food globally annually, $1 trillion of food globally annually. And those
okay,
are, if you're interested in the sources, it's mainly from the Food and Agriculture Administration, Boston Consulting Group. There's a lot of great research on our website that you can find.
okay, great. Thank you. So someone asked about, what about all the foods now bearing a best by date? My understanding is that other than fruits and veggies, these are bogus / meaningless. This is a real problem as many people are guided by these dates. Any comments on the sort of confusion and obfuscation around the various date labeling on products? And how does that sort of play into some of the food, waste that gets generated that you guys are working on, particularly at the grocery store and that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's a big challenge, and the person who asked that question is right. So except for infant formula, where which by law has to be discarded on the date, best by, use by, best if consumed before, there's very little regulation or meaning or teeth in any of these. They tend to be more of a marketing negotiation between the retailer, who wants long shelf life to reduce shrink and waste, and the manufacturer, who wants short shelf life to increase velocity. And there's always a lot of back and forth, and actually people like me do studies to advise on what the best by or use by should be. And you're absolutely right. There's a lot. It's not an indicator of safety. I'm not necessarily recommending this, but if you found a 20 or 30-year-old can of tuna, you could probably open it and eat it perfectly safely. It might smell a little funky from some rancidity, but it won't kill you in all likelihood, right? Unless you see like a sign that there's a problem, like a dent or a bulge or something. So yes, a lot of waste is precipitated by those sell by and use by, and another big challenge is that even though the food inside those packages could be very easily composted, the decanting process to get things out of cans or boxes or plastic sleeves is very cumbersome and very expensive. And so the path of least resistance is often to dump them. Another related challenge is, even though it's perfectly legal and acceptable to donate those expired packaged foods, consumers of soup kitchens, food pantries, shelters, do not want to see expired food. And so often even food banks or other agencies will reject those products for being expired, or agencies will send them back even if they're donated by a retailer. So it's a very frustrating environment. There is some legislative work kind of happening that Harvard Food Law and Policy Center is involved in, but as far as I know, it's not there. Turner and I may know more.
Anna, I wanted to bring you more into the conversation. There's a question here. Does Matriarch determine what products they make based on products that are available? And I assume the second part of that sentence, they mean waste products that are available.
Yeah, great question. And I'm sorry, my computer for some reason is not allowing me to access my camera for this GoToMeeting program. So I hope my voice will suffice for the day. Yeah, so we really, unlike I think most general food companies that start out thinking, oh, I want to make my grandmother's favorite popcorn recipe, or I am a chef and I made a great sauce in my restaurant that everyone loves, and I'm going to bottle it and sell it. And then those companies really go out and look for the ingredients that match what they've made. The way that we develop our products is really looking at the supply chain of wasted food. So we work with large fresh cut facilities. They give us once they agree to have the conversation and explore what working with us would look like, they will give us a list of the remnants that they have, and we ask them for quantities and the state of them, et cetera. And then we look at those lists and we develop products based on what exists. And obviously, a vegetable broth concentrate is such an, seemingly obvious place to start. In the products that we'll be releasing later this year, we've taken it a step further and sort of done a matching, a matching grid of buyers. In particular, we worked with some school food service directors in particular, because that's an area where people are looking for healthier products, they're looking for more vegetable forward, and they have a very severe price point that they need to match in order to be able to buy. And so we got ideas from them about the types of things that they needed, for center of the plate and things that they had tried out perhaps in their own kitchens, but that were not available commercially. And so the products that will be coming out later this year are based on the customer's needs matched against what exists in the supply chain as surplus. So I hope that answers the question.
That's great. Thank you, Anna. This is a little bit of a sort of follow-on and maybe kind of out of the box question, but does upcycling in your various understandings of it include taking atmospheric or industrial CO2 and turning it into feed or even food suitable for humans? This seems like a really out of the box question to me, but I'd like to hear what you guys think of that question.
Not yet, but I'm just reading a book, Technically Food, which is talking about some innovation companies that are doing that. I don't know anyone in the UFA or in the upcycling world yet who's doing that, but maybe Turner and Jonathan have some higher level science friends than I do.
That's John more than me.
No, I do
what
not.
I would say is that would not meet the definition of upcycling, because we're looking for a food product that otherwise would have gone to waste. That's really the crux of the definition, is that, like I said, there's some technicalities, but it has to have a verifiable supply chain and it has to have a positive impact on the environment. But the first and foremost thing that we're looking for is it food that otherwise would be going to waste? That's the definition of upcycled food. And that's what we're looking for when we're upcycling or when we're certifying products is upcycled certified. But the philosophy that the question asker is getting to is spot on, which is we put a lot of energy out there into the byproducts of manufacturing. And whether that byproduct is carrot tops that you can turn into a vegetable broth concentrate, or the byproduct is CO2, the commonality there is that you put a lot of energy into growing that carrot top. You put a lot of energy into producing that CO2 through the combustion process and everything. And so don't you want to get everything out of that you put into it? And so this is what we mean when we say we're moving towards a more circular economy. We're moving towards an economy in which we call things what they are. If it's an ingredient, call it an ingredient. If it's a feedstock for some new process, call it that. Don't call it waste, because that keeps it stuck in people's minds as something that doesn't have value when it has a lot of value. And if we can tap into that, there's all kinds of new sustainable technologies and economies that are waiting for us to create.
John, did you want to weigh in at all on this?
No, I don't know anything about that question except to say I'm a cook, so I deal with food. There is a lot happening in the food tech space, but I'm not familiar.
Okay.
I will say,
so go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, again, I'm sort of obsessed with this book I'm reading about food tech, but I think what's interesting about the upcycled food movement is, people are dealing with real ingredients here and making real food. I mean, there's just not, we're not talking about, I mean, whether you like Beyond Meat or Imperfect Meat or whatever the hell, that's your choice. But what I love about the upcycled food movement is that people are working with real food. This is food that, comes off farms, that is, coming out of healthy things. I mean, you can debate whether or not beer is healthy, but, the spent grain sure is. Tofu byproducts. This is food that is already, being grown, harvested, lightly processed, transported, using natural resources, and is nutritious and naturally nutritious. And I think that that's just an important thing for everyone to remember here as we go, as everyone's sort of looking for ways to make an impact on the environment through the production of food, that a lot of this, technically produced food, may be reducing the amount of beef cows that are, being bred for meat production. But what's that doing to the human body, and what are the long-term effects of that? And I think that, upcycled food is not using a lot of junk.
Okay, so I'm going to switch gears a little bit because we've got a couple of questions here. We've got a lot of questions, so we're going to try to get to as many as we possibly can. So there's a couple of questions about the packaging used on, upcycled food. How is it glass, plastic, or, how much attention are you paying to the kinds of packaging that you use? Is there any consideration to encourage more sustainable packaging? Is this part of the certification that you give to the upcycled food products? So lots of interest in that. Who wants to comment on that? I don't know.
I can start.
I think we all can. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to hear from Anna as someone who has actually grappled with this. But from my perspective, working with all 170 of our members, these are the companies that care the most about sustainability of basically any food company out there. And so they're really progressive in the ways that they seek out sustainable packaging solutions. Anna can probably talk a little bit more specifically to the limitations of those solutions, like composting packaging, etc. But what I will tell you is that this is really the group of businesses that's at the forefront of finding the right solutions. I know that there's something out there that a lot of our members are taking advantage of, where they actually pay, the food company just opts into this and they pay a premium to have a nonprofit organization, go clean as much or more plastic out of the ocean as the weight of the plastic they use in their packaging. And they're just opting into that, paying to have that done as a statement of their values, that they want to see a world in which there's less plastic in the ocean, less food waste. And so, Anna, I'd be interested to hear what you have to say on like the limitations of what are the sustainable options out there. But I would also just say that like this is a really thoughtful group of businesses that is, oftentimes willing to pay a premium for a more sustainable packaging solution.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's such a hot topic, and it's such an important topic. But first and foremost, what I will say is that in order for food to be made food safe, it has to be packaged, and that packaging has to have barriers to bacteria. In fact, I just finished reading a biography about Clarence Birdseye, and his, basically, yes, he brought frozen vegetables and refrigeration to the world, but his biggest contribution was actually in the packaging he developed. So, I think all the upcycled food companies get asked about their packaging as if somehow being an upcycled food company means that somehow by a miracle you've also created the most perfect environmental packaging out there. which would be great if it happened, but that is not what we're, that's not what our businesses are. That said, I mean, I can only really speak for, for Matriarch in this. We have sought to use the most sustainable packaging that there is, which is why we work with Tetra Pak. It's the largest packaging company in the world. And their packaging is made, 70% recyclable. It's Forest Stewardship Council certified. So they're growing forests to make, to increase the environmental, good environmental impact of their packaging, and they're constantly working on new methods, but it's very hard to recycle. It can only go to certain recycling facilities, et cetera. We were part of a circular economy program that was sponsored by the second largest packaging company in the world, Huhtamaki. And as part of that program, there were a number of companies developing packaging, really innovative packaging, but that's not yet been scaled or, tested deeply enough in the market to be ubiquitous by any stretch of the imagination. But there's a company that's making packaging out of seaweed. I think there's a lot of promise there. We don't put anything of ours in plastic except for one large order that we do, and it's in a recyclable plastic container so that those containers go to the end user and they are returned and reused. But I think really, as Forrest said, everyone is extremely thoughtful about it, but we are only able to use what is currently available. And, some of us, Matriarch for sure, working with a couple of innovation companies and letting them use our products to test their packaging with, so that when they get to the point where it could be commercially produced, we will be the first able to package in that.
So we have some questions about your supply chains. One is compliments this webinar, says this is great. I wonder if you could comment on the data that over 80% of food waste occurs at consumer facing, that's restaurants, retail, grocery stores, etc., and household level. Do you have any ideas on how to penetrate this part of the supply chain, and what are the challenges, in your opinion, to working with this kind of waste, aggregation, contamination? Someone else asked about, is transportation costs an impediment to, the development of, more upcycled food products in terms of supply chains?
Well, the beautiful thing about the upcycled industry is that it's consumer driven and it's market driven. And so if something doesn't work economically speaking, then it just won't work. And then a new solution that does work economically will swing in. And so there are some of our members who are upcycling food that comes from those later stages in the supply chain. I think that because of what the question asker is getting to is that, when you go, by the time you get to a retailer, the food, when I was the executive director of Denver Food Rescue, we would show up at a Whole Foods and you're picking up all kinds of things, potato salad and fresh produce and beverages, right? And so like you can't, there's no product that I could think of where you can use all of that stuff as a feedstock, right? But you can do other things with it, like according to the EPA food recovery hierarchy, it's better to feed it to animals, it's better to anaerobically digest it to make energy, it's better to compost it, all before you send it to the landfill. So all of those things are positive. But in terms of the consumers, like I said before, consumers are the worst sector. Worst offender by sector in terms of food waste. And so we're certainly not going around to people's households and collecting the food that they're going to throw away from their households and upcycling it. That makes it even more complicated. But here's my conjecture, and it is a conjecture, but it's a hopeful conjecture, and I think that there's some evidence that could back it up. Plant-based food has been around forever. Electric cars have been around forever. Locomotives are electric cars, for example. Basically. And these technologies are not new, but why does it seem like these technologies like plant-based meat and and electric cars are new. It's because there's widespread accessibility to popular consumer products all of a sudden. Electric cars have been around forever, but now we have Tesla, and everyone knows Tesla. Plant-based meat has been around forever, but now we have Impossible and Imperfect. Impossible and Beyond Meat. Widespread and accessible consumer products that elevate the general level of understanding of that industry in the mind of the consumer. And so my hope is that through the upcycled industry, we're elevating the amount that people are thinking about food waste and that they understand about food waste. And so they're taking more action within their own households to prevent food waste in addition to buying upcycled products. So in addition to buying upcycled products, I'm going to be more thoughtful and start a backyard composting bin. I'm going to go to the grocery store more often as much as possible. I'm going to not buy in bulk as much as possible. The other things that I can do personally in my household to prevent food waste, because my level of understanding has been elevated due to the accessibility of all these consumer products that prevent food waste.
Anyone else have any comments on that?
I'm just going to go ahead, John. No, you go.
I was going to say, yes, absolutely, supply chain is a challenge. Transportation costs are a challenge. Food is relatively inexpensive, although it may not feel that way to a manufacturer or a consumer. So if let's say you're making a product from, juice pulp, by the time you stabilize that juice pulp and get it in a truck and transport it to where it's going, it may be more cost effective to buy new produce and juice it. And that's an unfortunate challenge that a lot of people are experiencing. We have a big country and we don't have a very kind of efficient centralized food hub of manufacturing, so things have to travel some distance. That's a challenge. Another challenge, yes, is as you go from sort of farm and source to consumer, the diversity of food waste and the diversity of food waste increases, as Turner was mentioning, and the quality decreases, right? So the fact that I have half a bunch of cilantro from Taco Tuesday in my fridge is not going to be a viable ingredient for any sort of upcycling intervention, right? So at the consumer level and at the chef level, and we've been doing some work with the James Beard Foundation on this, a lot of the work is on consumer education and professional education, servers, chefs, plate waste, things like that. It doesn't mean, and yes, while the bulk of food waste happens at the retail through consumer level, that doesn't mean that there's not an opportunity to improve operations at the manufacturer level where it's pre-consumer, high quality surplus that can be made into delicious upcycled products. So that's where our focus has been for the most part, because that's where those opportunities are. And the problem is so vast that, and they're co-streams, right? So as long as we are going to buy fresh cut vegetables, Matriarch Foods will be in business. As long as we're brewing beer, we will have spent grain to bake with. And the way it's working right now, we'll have way more spent grain to bake with than demand for, we'll never surpass, or is unlikely to surpass, the demand for beer, right? And that's true for so many of these co-streams. So, I think it's really aligning doing the right thing on the manufacturing side, pre-consumer, and then modeling those behaviors and getting consumers excited about greening their own practices and buying better to sort of join us in this movement.
So I'm sorry if there's some ambient noise here. I'm in a basically construction zone outside my house. There's a couple of questions I want to get to that folks have had. One is, can you review the criteria for something to receive the upcycled food label? And is there other certifications around food waste, or is this the main one?
This is the first one. It's the first third-party verified certification for upcycled products, which is really exciting. And it also helps to explain why it was so difficult. It was a really long process and a grueling one, and one that Anna and John and the rest of our board members really contributed a lot to. A huge board of international world experts on product certification who volunteered their time. A ton went into this, and what we've come up with is a really rigorous process that ensures that when a consumer buys an upcycled product, they can be confident that there's a considerable amount of food waste being prevented. And so whoever answered the question obviously has not read the 30-page upcycled standard document, which shocks and appalls me. But because you didn't have the 2 days that it would take to skim through that, I guess I can kind of explain it. Basically, what we're looking for is food waste prevention. You have to show that either more than a certain percentage of your product is made up of an upcycled ingredient, or some products can't use some products are just using an upcycled flavoring or something that can't meet that percentage threshold, but they're producing a ton of that product. So on the tonnage basis, it's preventing a ton of food waste. And so either you can say, okay, we're using above the threshold percentage of upcycled ingredient in the formulation, or really, we're preventing over the course of the year by creating this product, we are preventing a certain over the threshold limit for tonnage of food waste prevention. So that's basically it. And there's some technicalities, but those are really that's the crux, is to show that the product through and we're going, and the third-party certifying body that we're working with, Where Food Comes From, is going back into the supply chain and verifying with the suppliers and everything that indeed this food otherwise would have gone to waste.
So I had a question. How do you relate to labels around organic food, given that you may be sourcing food that wasn't grown organically? I'm just sort of curious about how then, upcycled food relates to organic food. If the source of the food waste was not organically grown. Is that a clear question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I have one answer to that. I mean, you can source organic upcycled ingredients, but for us, and this is something, I do try and talk about a lot, because people's understanding of, the organic certification, everyone's like, oh yeah, it's organic, it's great. For us, we try to be organic as much as possible, when possible, but if we were going to be a certified organic product, it would mean that we couldn't necessarily work with small to mid-scale farmers because they can't afford the certification process. And so, just from that point of view, I think it's just important for everyone to understand that organic isn't always the only way, or even necessarily the best way. And, while it's certainly better practices for the environment, there are a lot of farmers out there who farm organically and have great growing practices, but are not certified organic. So we don't want to remove them from the supply chain of large scale production because of that.
Okay. So we have an interesting question here, and so we have only 5 minutes left, so I'm aware of that. But this, I think, is an interesting question. And then I want to hear you guys talk about, we've got a lot of people who want to get more involved in the movement, who want to know where they can buy these products, what grocery stores sell them. So if we could end on that. But before that, this is a question about food insecurity, and how does the upcycling food movement address food insecurity and expand healthy, dignified food for folks who are food insecure?
I mean, I can take that one again, or Turner, Jonathan, but the upcycled food movement in and of itself doesn't address food insecurity. It's companies within the upcycled food movement who are focused on that as part of their value proposition. I mean, you know, for Matriarch, that is one of our main value propositions, but for a snack company, it's not. So in the same way that packaging, you know, and a food company that is environmentally focused isn't necessarily doing literally everything in the list of goodness. You know, it doesn't mean that they're necessarily, you know, like using the best packaging or donating everything to a food bank. You know, they're companies like any other. Some are more business, you know, business focused and high-end luxury products, and some are more focused on you know, on specifically the environment. And you know, as in our case, we're focused on both the environment and access. I'm sure that Jonathan and Turner have an answer for that.
Yeah,
Well,
oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say one of the criticisms of the upcycled food movement, which I don't think is a very valid one, is that it takes food, surplus food, and puts it into value-added products rather than getting it into the hands of people who need it. And I think without examining the details, you know, from a sort of airplane, you know, looking down at the world, that might make sense. But once you get into it, you know, I don't think we want to be taking the, you know, carrot, onion, and celery scraps from fresh cut vegetables and giving them to people experiencing food insecurity. I think a product like Anna's is a much more dignified and more effective and efficient and safer way to get food to people who need it, right? So I think it's a really, it's a simplistic critique. And then when you get into it, you know, we're not giving people juice pulp and spent grain and so on. And the argument is a little bit different in terms of secondary markets for produce and meat and things like that. But actually, that rescued relish that I showed you earlier in the presentation is a really important example. So that was designed really to destigmatize upcycling in the early days, and we've come so far that we kind of forget about it. But products made from food that would otherwise be wasted were seen by some as only a food insecurity solution or alleviation. And the problem with that is that it has a stigma for those who need it, and it's not accepted by those who don't. So we've been working with a lot of products like that were designed to be sold at two tiers, right? So that the, you know, and Philabundance has a brand called Abundantly Good. They're a UFA member. That's a great example. So they're buying surplus milk. They're making upscale cheese that sells for $20 a pound, you know, $8 or $10 for a little 8-ounce package in specialty stores. And the revenue from that cheese goes to make the same farmer, the same cheesemaker, it's used to make commodity cheese that's distributed through the food bank. So there's an opportunity to do that kind of work. But as Anna said, it's really up to the members and more than the movement.
We're pretty much out of time, but I do want to address some of the requests for more information about what grocery stores are carrying these products and how people can get involved. Maybe Turner, you can
absolutely
talk to that, speak to that.
Yeah, I'm
absolutely.
Sorry. Also, this is Anna. I have a hard stop at 2:30, but thank you all for having me. And we're available through Imperfect and Hungry Harvest. If you're food service, Cisco, US Foods, Baldor, and also on our website, matriarchfoods.com. And anyone who wants to reach out to us, please feel free. We're happy to talk about anything, jobs, getting involved, volunteer, internships, information. We all need to work on this together. So thank you all so much for having me.
Thank you, Anna. It's great to have you.
Yeah, thanks, Anna. Yeah, and
Turn
the
on giving
rest
you
of
the
our
final
members,
word.
yeah, the rest of our members, you can also find their products on their websites. You can find their websites on our website, upcycledfood.org, and under membership, there's a whole directory of all of our members, links to their websites. Soon, and we don't have this yet because, again, we just launched the certification like a month ago, you're going to be able to go onto our website and find all the certified, upcycled certified products, and then right on our website, find a link to all the places that it's sold online. So that will be a really great solution as you start to experiment with there's hundreds of these products already out there, delicious snacks and nutritious foodstuffs and everything in between. So a great place to go to get more involved in the movement and just to try out the delicious products is upcycledfood.org. And thanks, Terry and Numoa, for having us. Great conversation. Thanks, John. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys. It's been a great conversation. Have a great rest of the day. I'm hungry now from this whole conversation. I think I have to go have a snack.
Thank you.
No, it's
Me
great
too.
to be working with
Bye.
you guys on this, and hopefully we'll be in touch. Okay? Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.